Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, Theo and Brian here to provide some quick context for the upcoming episode. What you're about to listen to is the fourth segment in a 7-part interview series we recorded this fall about an exhibition that is currently on view at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. The exhibition is titled Touching Roots, Black Ancestral Legacies in the Americas, and it is located on the 3rd floor of the Art of the Americas wing in the MFA.
This exhibition is included with general admission, so there's no extra cost to see it, and we highly recommend you check it out.
This week's installment is with artist Aoife Franklin. Her work has been shown in museums and galleries all over the state. She's a published author, an amazing speaker, and she has 2 pieces in the show, one of which inspired the title of the exhibition, Touching Roots. She's also an SMFA graduate and a well-known artist in the city of Boston. Her website reads, Aoife Franklin's practice involves several genres of art making inspired by slave narratives, dreams, dance, song, and visions. Over the last decade, she has been developing the Indigo Project, which honors the lives and history of formerly enslaved Africans and African Americans who labored to produce materials that generated the wealth of nations. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. We enjoyed making it. All right.
Okay, hello?
Hey.
Hello.
Okay, cool. Hey, how are you guys today? How was your day?
It was good. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We interviewed another artist earlier, unrelated to this project, but we've been running around, keeping busy. We both have are working other jobs outside of the podcast, so we usually only get to work on this for a couple days a week. So, and this is the job that we like to do.
Yeah.
So it's
you
fun.
know what I'm saying? Yeah. I can relate 100%.
For sure.
And I was very glad that you guys were flexible because I was like, well, I could do it at 7 p.m. because, I'm working, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, of course. How was your day? Did you have a good day today?
Thank you for asking. Yeah. The temperature change is so quick and drastic here, and you would think I would be used to it by now, but
Yep.
I know.
I'm a little, yeah. Other than that, I'm good. Nothing to complain about.
Have you moved to Boston? Are you originally from Boston? You moved to Boston recently?
No, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I've lived in Boston for about 30 years.
Oh, gotcha.
Since the mid-'80s or something.
Oh, okay.
That's
like
cool.
That.
So to get into, I guess, a part of it, we're interviewing you because of, your contribution and work and Touching Roots with the MFA Boston, which congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. That's so cool.
Oh, gosh. I'm so excited about it because, I graduated from the School of Museum of Fine Arts, so I'm very thrilled to be at the museum of my alma mater.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That sounds so unreal. Could you tell us a little bit about you? So you said you grew up in D.C. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about like your background and your upbringing, and like who you are, who you grew up, how you grew up?
Well, that's kind of a broad sweep.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
Maybe to narrow it down a little bit.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Oh.
I was just gonna say, I grew up in D.C. in the 70s. I mean, I was born in 1960, so I lived through some beautiful times in D.C. Some beautiful times and turbulent times. I remember, the riots. All of that, but I also remember block parties and all the neighbors and all the kids on my block and just beautiful. Growing up in DC at that time was magical. It's a very different time. DC now is extremely gentrified. Like my mom is the only black person on my block, and I grew up in a totally black neighborhood. So that's really different when I go home. But I still get the feeling of being home and being held in a certain way. And that's where I began my career as an artist. The very first artist that I've ever known is my grandmother, who made quilts. And I didn't realize that until after I was in school. Like, I was like, people are like, oh, who's your first influence, your first artist influence? And I'm like, my grandmother. And my grandfather loved electronics. He loved cameras and electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And I became the family photographer because I was the person who could get things in the frame and could just do that.
You had
really
an artistic
nicely.
sensibility.
Yes, I definitely did. And so in high school, I started studying photography at an after-school, an arts after-school program.
Yeah.
At a place called the Lemuel Penn Center in Washington, D.C. And that's where I studied photography with some really great photographers who are still practicing today. My teachers at that time, they're still practicing artists in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And that portfolio that I put together from 2 years of that practice was what launched me to get into art school. And from there, the rest is history, I guess.
Right. What kind of, in terms of like growing up and going to school, college for the first time, did you leave DC and go right to the SMFA?
No. Great question. I left DC and went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design.
Wow.
For 2 years. And then I transferred to California College of Arts and Crafts, which is now California College of the Arts.
Wow.
And then I dropped out of school for like 3 years, and then I moved to Boston, and I finished here.
Okay.
That's quite a college experience. Were you very studious and dedicated, or like what kind of experience did you have in school? I asked that because I left college after like a year and a half. I didn't do very good. Haven't finished yet.
I feel like I was definitely dedicated. It was a totally different experience for me, when I think about class and money. Like, a lot of people go to visit colleges before that. I didn't have the money to do that.
Yeah.
So I went from high school to Minneapolis, a place I had never been in my life. My parents didn't go with me.
Oh, wow.
So it was totally me there.
Yeah. Did you go there the first time just to start class? Like, jump right in?
I'm sorry?
Did you just jump right in with the beginning of classes? Like, when you first got there, as you were there?
I had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds scary.
You get there and you have a little orientation and that, but it was really, you have an orientation, but I was very disoriented, like very, living in a dorm, it was all extremely new.
Yeah.
And I was able to do it, and the reason that I transferred is because of the weather, not because I couldn't handle the school. It was more because I had never lived in an environment like that.
It's like ice cold up there, right?
Oh my God. And I lived right on campus, so all your classes were there, but by the time you leave your building and just walk across the campus, which wasn't far, your nose hairs would freeze and all this stuff that I had never experienced in my life. And I was like, I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
There's a cohort of art colleges, and I just transferred within the cohort so I could keep my credits.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to California, was there. And then once I was in California, that was such a different environment than the East Coast, because I had never been there either. So I went there, and this first time I'd ever seen palm trees, first time I'd ever, the weather was just so beautiful. And that's where I came out, and fell in love for the first time. And then, you're young, you're in school, you fall in love, and then you don't go to school because, you're just tooling around with people and all this stuff. But
right.
I made incredible work wherever I was, because that had just been ingrained in me, and it was something that I knew that I did well. So I made incredible work at both schools that I still have in portfolios now. And then yeah, I dropped out for a while, and then I came here, was working, and then I realized that I needed to go back to school,
Yeah.
and I needed to finish. And mass art is in the consortium of these different art colleges, so I could have transferred all my credits and been a junior like right then and there. But people were saying to me that I should go to museum school. I met several people who said you should go to this school. I know I lost credits. I lost like 2 years worth of credits, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me was to be at School and Museum of Fine Arts.
I've heard good things about it.
I mean, now it's totally run by Tufts, and so I don't know what the school is like now. I just know what it was like when I was there, and it was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about that experience for you, like comparatively to the other schools? Was it the best one you felt like you had attended, or just maybe the right time?
There was a lot more. Well, there was okay. When I went back to school, I was considered to be like an older person. I was 27.
Yeah.
And everybody else was like much younger. So I had been to college before, so I knew I had more focus. I had a different kind of focus.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to disappoint my family. I was the first one to go to college, and when I dropped out, my grandfather, he was so disappointed, because my grandparents are part of the Great Migration north, out of the South to make a better living, and they toiled so hard to get everything that they had.
Yeah.
So I was the hope.
Yeah.
So,
and
go ahead.
So when I went back to school, he was very happy about that, and so was I.
One thing that seems really that sticks out a lot to me about the story so far is that you growing up in DC and stuff, I think I guess even in terms in my life and what I've known, it's definitely there's usually only a few kids that just up and leave and go to a brand new city, or you know what I mean? People usually try to keep stay local or stay with what they know. I think it's really interesting and brave that out of high school or in the first person in your family attending college that you would go so far away right off the bat. I'm curious, what do you think at the time or in your nature, did you want to get away from DC, or was it just about new experiences?
It was a combination of things. I definitely feel like it was driven by my ancestors. You know what I'm saying? My work is very connected to the source of my ancestors, the voices of my ancestors. And, at that time, I don't know that I necessarily understood it as that. I just knew that I thought about things differently than my family. And because I had the experience in the arts after school program to be around other Black artists, other Black working artists who said, you can be whatever you want. You can go to art school. You can do this for a living if you want. My family, I don't necessarily come from a household of artists. I come from a household of people who, you gotta, not that artists don't work, but, they just work in a different way.
Yeah.
And what I really love is that when I said I wanted to be an artist and go to art college, no one tried to discourage me. No one said you can't do that. You can't be an artist. You can't make a living. Like a lot of people I went to school with said their family said that. My family did not. They were like, my grandfather said, you want to go to art school? Okay. And they had seen my portfolio. I had been winning awards in local photography contests and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So he said, just be the best.
I love that.
He said, just be the best.
And that is huge for a young person to get that approval from, their grandparents and their parents.
Yeah. And also, you take into consideration that my grandparents didn't go to college. My grandparents never went on vacation.
Yeah.
Wow.
I never saw my grandparents go on a vacation. So, your family, no matter where you come from, your family wants your parents, your grandparents, they want you to be more free than they were.
Yeah.
They want you to have more opportunities than they ever had. So, you know, I'm a descendant of freedom seekers who were enslaved, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a descendant of sharecroppers and freedom seekers. My grandfather and my grandmother were definitely freedom seekers. They left the South. They left Jim Crow. They left that behind in the most forceful way, because I mean you can leave it behind, but it's never been left behind because it's still here. But they left it in a way that they were like, we're not going back, we're not turning back, we want more for our family and we deserve more.
Yeah.
So they took those risks, and I mean, I'm sure that's why I was able to take the risk to go to school that way. Like, they didn't know anybody in DC, they just knew that's where they needed to go.
Yeah.
Do you feel any connection to the kind of like hero's journey myth?
I don't know what the hero's journey myth is. I just know that I needed to go.
Right.
I know that I feel propelled by my ancestors to go and seek my own life, my own freedom, and to make my mark on the world. So, and I had the support and love of my family, and I had a really dynamic portfolio. I had a really dynamic I applied to 3 different schools and I got in.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of work were you making at the time? Sorry.
Black and white photography. I wanted to be. I was studying black and white photography. This was before digital photography, so
Right.
I learned to develop my own negatives and print my own images and know how to, work in the darkroom.
Yeah. That's really cool. So
Yeah,
were you doing the black and white photography in the after school program, or was that when you started college?
No, that was prior to college. Mm-hmm. I studied at the Lemuel Penn Center. I studied with Llewellyn Berry and Lee Mosley.
Mm-hmm.
They are still practicing photographers to this moment.
Wow.
I was totally ready for what I knew what to do when I got into the darkroom. I didn't need the basics.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. That's exciting. How do you feel that college changed your art making practice things? It sounds like you were already like hit the ground running when you got there.
Oh, it was so expansive because you could do different things. Okay, I didn't like the fundamental classes because I don't draw, the human figure, and so that sucked for me. But
Yeah.
it was important to be in those classes. It was important to be around other people and hear them speak, and to see other people's work.
Yeah.
That is so exciting, and it's exciting, and it inspires.
Yeah.
So, in Minnesota, I remember, studying Native American history, which I never with a teacher who was Native American. I remember taking women's studies, just really expanding not just my brain, but my heart.
Yeah.
And meeting other people. I mean, I just feel like college is, everybody should be able to have that experience. It shouldn't be something that costs so much money that it's out of reach, because this is how you grow. This is how you become more of a citizen of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there are books that you can read that you have access to that you wouldn't have otherwise, and you just learn so much.
Yeah, and having those conversations with people from like all different backgrounds and all different experiences, and watching them grow too, like it's such a beautiful thing.
It was. Dorm life was crazy though. Like, I couldn't wait to get out of that.
What was dorm life like?
It was, I mean, it was different. I had never lived away from home.
Yeah.
And now you're living in this it was an it wasn't a dorm. It was like, it had a kitchen and different, it was more like an apartment.
Yeah.
But people were running around, it was freshmen. People were running around, getting drunk and doing all these things that I didn't do. Like, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, none of that stuff. So it was just really wild and noisy.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait to have a different experience from that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I just wasn't that person.
Yeah, with kids kind of running amok.
Yeah, but even that was important to my growth, and I'm not sure exactly how. I
Yeah.
guess it's important that I just know more what I like and what I don't. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that if I hadn't had the experience. I wouldn't have changed it for anything.
That
And
makes
I think
sense.
everyone should have that experience. And I was really glad to be older and have had more experience once I got into museum school, because I wasn't spending all my time in the atrium. Like, people hanging out in the atrium, smoking cigarettes, talking, da da da. I was working,
Yeah.
because I just had a little more focus. I had
Yeah.
fun too, but
A little more knowledge of yourself and what you were there for, maybe.
yeah. And at museum school, I got to do different things like ceramics, you know, um, performance art, which I incorporate into my work all the time,
Yeah.
video, everything. The art of a DNA, textile work from Nigeria and West Africa. I, I went in to finish my degree in photography, and then once I connected with Master Adede textile artist Stanley Pinkney, who went to the school, graduated from the school, and taught there for 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I never went back to the photography studio. And I still use my skills with my work even now.
Could you tell us about really we tend to ask our guests a lot about like mentors they've had in the past and stuff and people who really impacted them, and it sounds like your professor or this other Mr. Pickney that you were collaborating with, it seems like he had a massive impact on you. Could you tell us about that kind of mentor relationship, or like how that unfolded? Or
Well, I think of Stanley as the father that I never had.
wow.
I call him Baba Stanley, which is Yoruba for father. And I remember the day that I asked him if I could call him that, and he said yes. I worked with him for 3 years, I think, in his studio, and it changed my life. He changed my life. He is an incredible human being with an incredible cachet of knowledge. I mean, Stanley is a painter, a mosaic. He creates mosaics. People from other people. His studio was always filled with people, and they were from every different department. Because at the time, I don't know, people came from different departments and brought their work to Stanley so that he could help them be better at what they were doing. It didn't matter if it was jewelry making, print making. It didn't matter what it was.
Yeah.
He had the reputation of just being open, being honest, and if you're willing to work hard, not and smarter, he was just there for you. He gave me I remember coming to school once. It was winter. I don't know why I didn't have socks on. I don't know why I didn't have socks on. I don't know why. But I didn't have socks on, and who pays attention to that? He looked down and he said, "Why aren't you wearing socks?" And I said, He said, "Don't you have socks?" I said, "Yeah, yes, sir, I do have socks." And he looked at me and he said, because he knew my story about dropping out of the other schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You will wear socks. You cannot afford to get sick. You will graduate."
Oh, wow.
I just looked at him. My eyes got bugged out. I was like, "What?" He said, "Don't come here anymore without socks. You cannot afford to get sick." I was like, "Yes, sir." And I never did it again.
Yeah.
And I remember one time he would always ask me in the morning, you're a student, you're working, you have your work study job. He would always ask me, "Did you have breakfast? Are you hungry?" Da da da. And once I just didn't have money for groceries, and he gave me money
Oh, wow.
for groceries. He said, "You have to be nourished. You have to stay warm. You have to finish." So this is the kind of human being he is. And he's still my mentor. Stanley, I'm 62. Stanley is 82.
Wow.
And I still call him once a week. He lives in Worcester.
He's in Worcester.
I call him once a week. We talk. If I have an issue with something, he's helping me right now to repair a quilt that my grandmother made me that I took to college my first year of college.
Oh, wow.
My quilt is at his home in Worcester, and when I go out there, we work on it a little bit. But even if I have anything going on, he's there. The reception for Touching Roots,
Mm-hmm.
I could invite 2 people. He was first on my list.
Wow. He must have been so proud.
He was. Oh, my God. He was so proud, you know. It was like my family was there with me. My father was there with me in the halls of the museum. It was amazing.
Unbelievable. And over the years, were you going to the museum, going to just see the art there, to check things out in your free time?
Sometimes, mostly when I was a student. But
Yeah.
once I graduated, I didn't really have time because I was just working so much, you know.
Yeah.
And at the time, the museum was not as it is now. It was very, the work in there was just, there wasn't a lot that called me to want to go see it.
Yeah.
It wasn't diverse at all.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 15 years, it's a very different museum. Very different.
And you feel like it's changing for the better?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, even as far as applying for grants here in Boston in the early 90s, if you weren't doing a certain type of work, you wouldn't get funded. And I didn't get funded. Let me just keep it on me. And then my work has always been centered around who I am as a person. Black, female, queer, you know, all of that.
Yeah.
And people would tell me that my work was too political. People would say, you know, if you would talk about it in this particular way, or could you change this? And that's just not who I am.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm doing. So once I started Ife Franklin's Indigo Project, once I started thinking about the slave cabins, once I started putting my work together in a certain way, and applying for grants under that Ife Franklin's Indigo Project, where I wanted to, which I have done, but at the time I was trying to get funded to build life-size replicas of slave cabins to sit in spaces where you may not normally see them, because the enslavement of my ancestors happened everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I just kept getting rejected. And then I realized it's not because the work isn't good. Because, you know, you could call and say, well, was it my proposal? And they would be like, no, it wasn't your proposal. So I was thinking, well, then what is it? Then I realized they can't relate to my work. Whoever is on these panels cannot deal with what I'm talking about. Now, not now, people have always talked about slavery and freedom in their work. Always, if you look at the work of African American artists. Okay, like what I'm doing is nothing new. Yet, people are, people are just more open.
Yeah.
To the truth. People are just, some people are, a lot of people aren't. But most people are more open. Their institutions are more open, and they need to be.
Yeah.
Because there's so many incredible artists out here who just need the opportunity to show the work.
Right.
Or you show the work in certain venues, but you can't get in that big venue. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can't, where more people could see it and more people could experience it and feel it and come to understand it.
Right, especially museums too, because they're like, you know, it's like the gates of art history, so to speak.
They're the ultimate gatekeepers. They are.
Yeah.
And the thing about history, any type of history. It could be rewritten by anyone. But the thing about visual art, you can't rewrite that. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can edit an essay, but once a piece is done, it's there. You don't get to edit it.
Right. That's a pretty profound thing, because in terms of like oratory or writing, it's there. It's like an intellectual artifact that has to be reproduced and distributed. But the visual art, do you mean like the visual art, it isn't so easy to just augment it and change it and twist it in the way that people change words?
I tend to feel that way.
Yeah.
Yet again, with all of this digital technology and everything, people can change your work. So I don't want to be so cemented in that.
Oh no, yeah, I feel that.
But there's a fluidity in it all. There really is. And the thing is, when people want to know about culture, they look to the art and the artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
They do look at the written work, but a lot of times people look at what people created.
Yeah.
That is how you build a story. Is to go back and what did they wear? What kind of utensils what kind of artwork did they make? Who did they pray to? All of these things make up cultures, and this is what we go. These are the avenues where I really feel like I don't even want to say detective work, because you don't have to like look for it. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's on cave paintings, you know what I mean? Like it's there.
Yeah.
And you just get to learn a lot and everything you need to know about the culture from the artwork, I believe.
Yeah, it's that.
Because what about societies that didn't write things down? You learn from what you see, from what they did, from what they created.
And it's such a powerful thing too to think about the like kind of innate desire I feel like we have when we think about history, contemporary or ancient history. Like we want to connect with the people that lived then and kind of understand them on a human level. And that's what we do look to, is like it's a lot more, not more palatable, but more approachable for the average person to look at something that they made or something they used or something they wore rather than combing through literature about it, I think.
Yeah. And you know, like again, I don't want to cancel the other out. Like there's a balance that can definitely happen. But for me, being a visual person, I go to the visual.
Yeah.
You know, other people, their brain works in a different way, and they would go to the other. But for me, the visuals are everything. They feed me.
Yeah.
They fill me up.
One really interesting thing I wanted to ask you about too, you touched on it earlier, is the Indigo Project. Could you, it seems like, you were talking about submitting it to different things and people not recognize it. Based on your website, it seems like at present day, it seems to have had an amazing reception. Could you tell us about the Indigo Project and its components?
Sure. Present day, yeah. It only takes, if you're steady with your work, if you're consistent with your work, it just gets better. And even though I wasn't getting funded at the time, the work continues. Okay, the Indigo Project came about because I studied the art of Adire textile making with Stanley Pinkney. And through this traditional, most people look at these designs and say tie-dye or shibori. So people who went to the Peace Corps and went to Africa came back and was calling Adire tie-dye without putting the cultural component to it. So people, they think the Grateful Dead folks invented this.
Right,
when
so
it
an
was
element
really
of
the Africans.
Yeah.
Right.
People in Africa make this fabric. People in Japan make the same designs. This is the thing that's really incredible. In India, the same designs. So, how is it that these folks from different places are working with indigo and creating the same designs.
Mm.
Well, I happen to believe that, when the continents were connected, people traveled. People traveled. They shared ideas.
Yeah.
That's so profound. Could you tell us more about some of like the more detailed information about Adiri art and the process of?
Well, the art of Adiri comes from Nigeria, West Africa. Nigeria is a place where people, in Africa, the people grew their own cotton.
Mm-hmm.
People grew indigo. I've never been to Africa, so I've never practiced there, and I've never used natural indigo. I've only used synthetic indigo. Which,
Interesting.
Gotcha.
So my knowledge of Adire is through Stanley, who has lived in Africa, who learned what he learned from the women at the time when he was going, like in the late 60s, early 70s. Adire was considered women's work. This is what he taught me. And so a lot of the men there would tease him and say, "What are you doing? You're doing women's work." And he was like, "No, this is absolutely beautiful, and I want to learn this." So he comes back here to the States. He starts teaching at museums. I think he was teaching painting, and then someone approached him and said, "What about the fabric dyeing?" So everything that I learned about Adire, I learned from Stanley. All the different techniques. There are many different techniques. I tend to use 3 or 4 techniques. I think Stanley taught us maybe like 8 techniques. A folding technique that's called sabada. I use sewing techniques that are called alabare, which means to use needles. This one particular design that most people know that looks like a circle with a circle inside of it is called elelo. And then there's another technique that gives you smaller circles, elesho. So I tend to use these techniques and combine them in different ways. The Indigo Project came about. I had a wearable art business, Ife art, wearable art, where, I dyed clothes, I sold clothes, I did very well. And then I had a dream about another artist, Takwase Dyson, who was an environmental artist, who was living in Boston at the time, came to an exhibit that I had, and because I do so many different things like sculpture and this and that, and she said, "Okay, if you could do one of these things, what would you do?" And I said it would be the fiber work. And she challenged me. She said, "I would like you to cover the whole inside of your studio with fabric, the walls, everything." And I was like, "Oh gosh, okay." And that night I went to sleep and I had a dream, and my ancestors told me the name of the project, what it should look like, and that I should incorporate slave cabins with this Adire work, and that the cabins should be covered with this work, which is a hearkening to also because the slave quarter is hallowed ground for freedom seekers. I don't want to say runaways, freedom seekers, and my ancestors who were enslaved. And I wanted to, what my ancestors want me to do is to build replicas of these homes and make them beautiful because theirs weren't. And to give them something that is absolutely theirs because those cabins weren't theirs. And to incorporate the traditions of Africa into this cabin that is traditionally, it's American. It's the direct connection that combines the Africanisms and the Americanisms that make me who I am.
Yeah.
That's so profound. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. No, I set out to do that, and I didn't have funding. So the very first iteration of what this cabin would look like, I live in an apartment that has a very small porch on the back.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first iteration of what this cabin was going to look like, 3 friends of mine came and we wrapped the porch
Oh, wow.
entirely in the different fabrics that I had created.
Wow.
So then I had a total idea, the visual of what I wanted it to look like. And then, the project grew from there. I slowly started to apply for things. And then I applied for the very first grant that I ever received in my life as an adult person in my 50s, right? I've been applying all this time, and the first time I got was New England Foundation for the Arts, NEFA,
Yeah.
a Creative Cities grant, and that grant helped me to put the cabin in Franklin Park. Prior to that, wood was donated for the very first cabin that was actually at Medicine Wheel Productions, Michael Dowling's. Do you know Michael Dowling and
No.
Medicine Wheel Productions?
I'm not familiar,
you
actually.
don't know about... Oh, Medicine Wheel. Okay, now what is it called now? Oh my gosh, it's a different name now. Anyway, Medicine Wheel Productions was in South Boston for years. Michael Dowling does the Day Without Art.
Oh,
here.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so he had a gallery. He still... Spoke is the new name of a different gallery
Mm-hmm.
in Southie. So the very first cabin was installed there for a one-person show, and then the Fitchburg Museum bought it.
Wow.
So it's in their permanent collection, and they showed it for a year. I feel like I'm kind of jumping around here, but I'm just trying
please
to
do.
lay the foundation. So there's been 4 cabins so far. The very first one that the Fitchburg Museum purchased. The second one that was in Franklin Park as part of a whole installation of different artists. The third cabin was in North Charleston, South Carolina, a part of a folk festival that they have there every summer. And then the fourth cabin was in Franklin Park, right across from the golf course on a hill. And it sat there for about a month. It was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
And the cabin had a porch. This particular was the biggest of them all. And it was an exact replica of the slave cabin that's at the National Museum of African American Arts and Culture that was from Edisto Island.
Mm-hmm.
So this cabin had a porch. And what's really beautiful is the day that we had the inauguration of the cabin, the porch became an altar. People brought flowers. People brought moonshine in jugs. People brought Bibles. People brought collard greens out of their yard.
Did you expect that to happen? The
I didn't.
contributions?
I mean, I had objects on the porch. I wasn't expecting people to bring objects on the porch. And
Wow.
and part of that cabin also, the sides of the cabin, there was the front of the cabin and you have the sides, right? The back and the sides.
Yeah.
Was open, painted blue, open so that people could write inscriptions to their ancestors on the cabin. So it was also interactive. And this project also came about because I wanted to give something back to enslaved people that picked cotton and indigo that made this country wealthy. And these are 2 materials that I work with so freely, quote unquote. So it's definitely homage to people who picked cotton and indigo. Yet then I thought I need to be expansive so that it's for all of the enslaved, not just the people who toiled, lived, and died picking cotton and indigo. So these cabins, this work that I do, the processions that I do, all of the things that I do are for the ancestors.
Yeah.
Are to uplift them, their memories, their hearts, and to let them know that they're not forgotten and that we love them.
What is that experience like as a maker emotionally? Because it sounds so healing, but also so painful to be working with these themes and be, like you said, this came from a dream that you had and a communication from your ancestors directly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is
Mm-hmm.
that being a kind of conduit for that?
It is exactly what you described. It is beautiful, and sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's a perfect balance of the two. Yet, when I just keep my heart open, when the heaviness comes, I know when the heaviness comes, that's the generational trauma and pain, right?
Yeah.
And I talk to my ancestors and I let them know, hey, I see these visions that you're sending me. I feel them. And I also want you to see the vision of me here, free, with no scars on my back, with me being able to basically do and live the way that I desire, mostly. And I need them to trust me. I have to tell them all the time, don't be afraid. It's okay. It's okay. And we work it out.
Yeah.
We work it out. Like sometimes I have to even say, you're showing me too much right now. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too traumatic. And be here with me now in this space of comfort. Be here with me now. Like, resting is a big part of my practice. I rest a lot. I rest for them. I rest when they couldn't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Rest, love, and heal. Rest, love, healing, and recognition are, I would say, those are the key words and beauty are the key words of my practice. And those change, but I would say though that's really it.
I also saw in your portfolio this book that you had written, The Slave Narrative of Willie May. Was that also created in the same way, like through this spiritual process and through communication with your ancestors?
Yes, I am definitely a vessel, and I definitely know that they have me walking through portals all the time. Willie May, this book, a lot of times people, I don't know if I'm explaining, I feel like I'm explaining it correctly. This book, Willie May, is my great grandmother is Willie May. The character, the embodiment of this character is my great grandmother. It's not my great grandmother's story. This story is historical fiction, and I use my great grandmother's the memories that I've been told, because she died when I was 2 years old. Yet, I've come to realize that I have her same face. So she's around me all the time, and this book definitely was divine intervention, divine providence. I have a lot of friends who are writers. Poets, writers, playwrights. I have a lot of friends who do these things and been to their productions, but I never thought I'm going to write a book. So one day I wrote this book in my Facebook status bar over like a 3-month period.
Wow.
And it started out in, if you were to see the book, there's stanzas like number one all the way till I think there's like 36. And that's how I wrote it. Number one, this is da da da. Number two, and this is how it came to me. And it was coming to me, and I was writing, and people were responding, and it was really, really wonderful. And then I thought, maybe I'm being self-indulgent here, and I don't know if anybody is really paying attention. So I stopped. And then people wrote to me and said, well, what happened next?
Oh,
you can't leave us hanging. What happened to Willie May? So then I tried to write, and nothing was coming.
Yeah.
Nothing was coming. And I was like, okay, this doesn't feel right. And then a woman that I know who, the religion that I practice is called Ifa, I-F-A. It is a traditional indigenous practice of the Yoruba people. of Nigeria. So I know a woman who is a priestess in this religion. She DM'd me and said, "This is what you need to do if you really want the download of the book." And I was like, "Yes, I do." So she asked me if I had a picture of my great grandmother, which I do. She said, "Put the picture near your computer with a glass of water and a white candle, and the words will come." And I did that, and it was like the mother load of downloads, and my
Wow.
fingers were just flying. And that's how the book, I just relaxed and let spirit guide me as to what, let the ancestors guide me as to what should be written.
Wow.
And that's how it came.
That is powerful.
And since its creation, it's also become a performance and a film.
Okay. the It was when I wrote the grant for this, my book. This was prior to COVID. Okay, this was like right before COVID. So I get the grant. The grant, it was written to be an experimental performance piece. It was supposed to be live, experimental, okay? Because I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I wrote the grant. I was that honest. I was like, this is a total experiment. I'm not sure what this is going to be. So then COVID hits, and nobody can do anything in person. So there goes my rehearsals. There goes all of that. So I had to pivot, and everybody was doing their presentations via Zoom. And I didn't like the quality. I knew that wasn't good enough for what I wanted to do. So Loop Lab worked. Okay, I got a grant from NEFA and the Boston Foundation. And then, they have support people. So this organization, Loop Lab, that does video, was going to record everyone's pieces when we could do it prior to COVID. I spoke to the person, and he said, "Well, you don't have to do it Zoom. You can create a film." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "You can create." He said, "I could totally see this as a short film." So I just stayed open, and that's pretty new for me. Like, to just trust in this way. Like, COVID really taught me how to pivot, open up, be expansive, and to trust in ways that I never have before. So it went from being written as an experimental performance piece to then being a film. So then I had to, we were going to have auditions and all that stuff anyway. Everything happened on Zoom except the last two rehearsals, when everyone met everyone for the first time. And after those two rehearsals, we had to shoot the film.
Wow. That's a lot of pressure.
I mean, it was like...
Was it shot in Massachusetts as well?
Yes, it was shot in Medford. Have you ever heard of... You guys live in Boston? You live in Boston, yeah?
We're on the South Shore right now.
Oh, okay. In Medford, the last standing slave dwelling from Maine to Massachusetts is in Medford, at a place called the Royal House and Slave Quarters.
Wow.
Isaac Royal had sugar and rum plantations in Antigua, and his home base was Medford, Massachusetts. Tufts University sits on the 10 Hills, which was all his property.
Oh.
Isaac Royal gave the seed money for Harvard Law School. So you can, for like $8 or $10, you could go. It's on George Street, I do believe, in Medford. You can go take a tour of this plantation house and the slave quarter, which is made out of brick. Yeah. Many people just don't even, you're like, you think of the southern slave quarters were things that were, the dwellings were made out of wood, but because, New England and the weather, the house was made of brick.
Right. Yeah.
So, because of the relationship that I have with the Royal House and Slave Quarter, which is really, really beautiful, they allowed us to shoot on their location.
Wow.
So I was able to shoot my slave narrative on a real you know,
In a real
slave quarter,
Yeah.
which was incredible because the spirits of those ancestors were there blessing us the whole time. The whole time. Like, I don't know if you've seen my short film, but it's what those actors did was incredible. It's a
Yeah.
24-minute film. You can watch it. It's on YouTube. And I'm just always astonished by what they did. And Letta Neely, who is a playwright and an author and a poet, adapted my book into the screenplay, which of course, you know, was just brilliant. Their voice was on it, but it was still very much my voice. And the things that they added just elevated the piece. I mean, I learned collaboration. I learned so much from this book and from it being transformed into a film. I learned how to be a director. I learned how to, you know, I learned how to do all these different things.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, that it sounds like it was collaborative from its conception with sharing little bits of it or writing it for Facebook. That format kind of brought community to it from the very beginning.
Wow. It did. I didn't think about it like that. It sure did.
Good insight.
My friends were like, "What happened next? Tell us. You can't leave us hanging." So
that's a really cool thing.
It is. I'm learning to be more expansive. I'm telling you, it's just like I'm on this trajectory of trust, trusting myself.
Yeah.
Because I can't trust others until I trust myself deeply. And that has always been difficult.
Yeah.
Trust that my work is good enough. Trust that trust that I'm good enough. And, you know, for me, I tend to feel like, you know, everything that I create I'm birthing this. I'm not a mom, but I feel like everything that I create, I am. Like, I'm birthing. Do I put my children in somebody else's hands?
Yeah.
Like, how can I trust somebody else with my kids? Yet, I'm learning that I had to trust other people. Stanley, you know, my photography mentors, and myself for traveling. Like, I never thought about how brave it must have been for me to go to Minnesota until I talked to you guys. How brave I was. Because when you're young, you just feel like, I don't like this. I'm going to try something else. I wasn't thinking I was so brave. At this age, I think I would feel like, oh, yeah, I'm being really brave. But then you were just like, what the heck? I'm just going to go live my life.
Yeah.
That was probably a gift that you weren't hesitating or... You know, that you just said, like, that you didn't have to think about it, that you just said, you know what, I'm going to Minnesota and then California, you know what I mean? So that journey that you went on, like, without hesitation must have been really powerful.
Yeah.
It was without hesitation, and I can't say that it wasn't without fear.
Right.
But, like, one of the things that I learned from Stanley, he said, be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh,
that's
okay,
good.
I'll just jump in. Well, what I'm realizing is that I'm always supported by the community of my ancestors. My ancestors are so strong. Like, they support me, and they send others to support me. And now that I'm totally understanding that, even when things don't work out, because, you know, you work with people, sometimes it doesn't work out. You know, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep going. Just keep going. Like Harriet Tubman said, when you see the torches, keep going. When you hear the dogs, keep going. When you hear them calling your names in the night, keep going. So you just keep going.
Could you tell us about your journey in developing and starting to practice this this spiritual guidance and communication with the community of ancestors, and could you tell us, I guess, about how you came to believe in this?
Well, I think it's just always there in you. I think, no, I know, and I don't know if it's something that I can speak to, like, if you're not a part of this of my culture, right?
Okay.
Like, it's people who were enslaved had their spirit. If they had nothing else, if your children were sold from you, if you know, all of the horrific things that you could think about, but they couldn't. Okay, let me coin this phrase from Beyonce. You can't break my soul. Okay, you won't break my soul. It's too strong, and I feel like this is what a lot of white supremacists can't stand. It's like, we're still here. Like, you have tried everything in the book to crack us, and you haven't been able to do it because the spiritual foundation is so strong that we brought it with us here, and they weren't able to beat it out of us. They weren't able to pull our tongues out. They weren't, they could do all of those things, and they still couldn't break our soul.
Yeah.
So I feel like this journey is something that's just innately a part of me and innately a part of all Black people. It just is. Yeah. The spirit is elevated. I mean, you can see it in dance. You can hear it when we sing. You can, you can see it when people walk down the street and they have on certain colors or certain things, and you're just like, whoa, I just never went, whoa. And for me, it's just like normal, like, this is who we are.
Yeah.
We are the frequency. We are the colors. We are the texture. We are. And once you become more aligned with who you are, and basically for me, alignment is, again, trust and relaxing into that spirit, into those songs, into those spirituals, into the food that is cooked, into the love. Sometimes, okay, how about this? Like, this is why the cabin in the slave quarter is hallowed sacred ground. That could be the last time you see your mother. That's the place you were born. That could be the place you died. That could be the last time and you had to have a connection with something other than what was your pending reality. You had another reality. And this is the thing that Africans never lost, and they were able to, pass on to their descendants. So I just really feel like what's happening with me is not a rarity. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And it's not just my people. I feel like if you are open enough, if you can free yourself from the binary of all of the shit, okay, of all of the man-made shit that's telling you that you can't do this, you have to be here, you have to fit in this box. No, we're much freer than that. And when we are at peace. And I really believe there are people that can't stand to see this peace.
Yeah.
And that's why that's why artists are necessary. Whoever you are as an artist, whatever color you are, what gender you are, whatever your sexual preference, the world needs us to keep the world honest, to keep the world balanced, to keep the world sane. When things go down, like dictatorships and things like that, the first people they want to silence are the artists, the writers, the artists. Why? Because we're telling the truth.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going off on a whole nother tangent here, but I think it's connected.
Oh, no, it is. Well, it's evidenced, too, by the way that people were responding to the cabin that you installed with the porch, that it resonates on a level that is past words, it seems.
And the processionals, too. The thing about the thing about this work is that there is a great healing that needs to take place.
Yeah.
If I don't know anything else, I know that this work is ancestral, and I know that this work is healing. And I do know this. Black folks and white folks need to heal from the effects of enslavement. Not just black people. Like, we always think, okay, black people need to heal from. Yeah, we do. But so do white people. Because if your ancestor was an overseer who burned people at the stake, that lives in your DNA. Like, the whole oppression, like, the racism, the oppression, it gets passed down. Yeah. Why are people still racist and why is there still oppression? Because it gets passed down. That needs to be healed. Yeah. Because human beings should be able to live peacefully. We should be able to do that. And people can argue and say, well, never been able to do that. Never been able to do that. Well, let's try something else.
Yeah. We can choose to try to do that.
We have choices.
Yeah.
And now we have more choice. Well, I want to say we have more choices than ever, but because we do, again, there are people who cannot deal with that type of freedom, who are like putting, you can't, a woman doesn't have a right to choose, blah, 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 all this craziness. It's like, dude, why are you trying to control people?
Yeah.
Why are you afraid of what others can be? Why are you afraid of change? We wouldn't be here where we are right now if we didn't change. It's okay. I want to be like, yo, it's okay. Like when kids are having a tantrum. Sometimes I feel like that's what this nation is like. You're having like a major tantrum. You need somebody to rub your back. You need somebody to tell you it's going to be okay. It is, but you have to trust that it's going to be okay. You have to trust that it's okay to share. Like, it's really kindergarten stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? You got to share that toy. You got to share this land. You got to share.
Mm-hmm.
So, the artist will save the world. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though, like, this might be a weird statement, but in terms of all people needing to heal with the shock waves and the echoes of this transatlantic slave trade in America, do you feel like the continued oppression and white supremacy is like unresolved, like generational echoes, like in the oppressor as well?
Oh yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. People are still mad that they lost the war. Come on.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
sure.
Why are you mad? The reason that you're mad, let's get to it. The reason that you're mad that you lost the war is because you didn't want you want to continue to harm and maim and not pay my people. Like, let's put all the cards on the table. And you're still mad about that. After emancipation, plantation owners received reparations because they lost their property. I mean, this is history.
Yeah.
And black folks have not been able to get any reparations, but they paid these white folks because, oh, woe is them, and they couldn't do, oh, God, they just couldn't get it together, Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, this is the healing that needs to, that is why we have white supremacists. That is why we have Karens. These people who feel just like, when you see a Karen, that is a mistress from the South. That is just put the hoop skirt on her, et cetera, et cetera. That is who that is.
Yeah.
And they need to be healed from that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they don't even realize it. They don't realize that they need healing because the hatred has been so palatable and so normalized that they don't think there's anything wrong with them. That they think what they're doing is right. The harm, they feel like the harm that they're creating is the same harm that you see in a, like, 12 Years a Slave. Like, the brutality that you see or that you've read about, it's normalized, and they just feel like they can just continue it. Boy, do they need healing from that.
Yeah.
So, yes, I feel like it is definitely a ripple effect, and it's not something that's going to be healed in my lifetime. It has taken generations for people to be the way that they are. So it's going to take generations for them to erase that. And I feel like the work that I'm creating is a part of a healing technology, a healing frequency. I know it is. Um, if you're open, it's here, and you can be a part of it.
Yeah.
And it seems to be touching more people than not. I'm very fortunate. Like I've thought, you know, what if somebody could burn the cabin down? You know, and then I thought about that. I said, well, that would be in alignment with the, you know, with unfortunately that would be in alignment with history. But nothing happened to the cabin when it was in Franklin Park. No one. It was not destroyed. No one wrote profanity on it. Like it was just really deep.
Yeah.
Wow.
To circle back a little bit too, I feel like this kind of connects to something that you said earlier in our conversation, that maybe things have changed a lot in the past 15 years for like the MFA specifically, maybe Boston Arts, to expand a little bit on what you were saying in terms of acceptance of projects like this and funding for it. What do you think has changed in the last 15 years?
The gatekeepers. I mean, yeah, the people who make these decisions. When I got my first NEFA grant, and I realized that a lot of the people that I was working with, not just in my cohort, but the people who were running the city grant, were people of color.
Yeah.
When I looked at the cohorts that were previous to me, I knew a lot of the artists there. I knew a lot of them. And I was like, oh, wow. And I remember looking at Kim, who is one of the, I don't know if I want to say gatekeepers, but she works, Kim and Kamaria at NEFA. They're just amazing human beings. And I remember looking at Kim saying, oh, you fund people of color. And she just kind of blinked, and I was like, I'm just, this has not been my experience of being held in the light like this. Yes, I definitely see what has changed are the people who are sitting in the rooms.
Yeah.
And with this Olmsted grant that I just got for this processional that I'm having with community at the Cops Hill Burial Ground on the 25th, it's just amazing who these people are, because they realized that they wanted to ignite the parks, but they were like, well, let's look at everybody who's in this room right now. This is not all of Boston. Yeah. We need to expand and open up. So people, a lot of people are healing from, a lot of people want this healing. A lot of people understand that, a lot of white people understand that it is time to do the work. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be clean. It doesn't always mean that it won't come without tears and hard understandings. But that's the work that you have to do to heal. I mean, It's like going to therapy. You know, going to therapy is hard work.
Yeah. And
you bump up against feelings, and you remember things, and you're reflective on things, and you have to look at yourself.
Yeah.
Who are you? Who are you, and what kind of world do you want? And if you really want the world to be different, then you have to do the work. You have to surrender to the work. Yeah. And that is looking at your white privilege, understanding that that's a real thing, understanding there's structures put in place all the time to uphold this, and how it is harmful to others. So the folks at Olmsted knew that they needed to bring in community voices. So, you know, they have the money, and then they brought in community leaders to help them picking out who the cohort of artists were going to be, and looking at their projects so that they could understand better how these artists of color could ignite the parks. It's really incredible.
Yeah.
And it's time.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful thing to think about. It really is.
It it is. Healing is a powerful thing to think about, and it needs to happen all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever there is oppression, wherever someone who feels like I have to put my boot on somebody's neck in order for me to feel tall,
Yeah.
to quote Toni Morrison, like, who are you without your race? Who are you? Like, most people are like, so I'm this, I'm that. Who are you without that? Are you a good person?
Mm.
And, now's the time. I mean, I don't want to feel like there's a part of me that feels like now's the time to put that in motion. Now's the time to prove it. Now's the time to, like, do the work to say, I don't understand. Do the work to say, well, I did this workshop, and there was a section on white supremacy. And the person who came forward, who led it, this woman, she said, I thought I had it all together as an ally. I really thought I was doing really good work. And she said, once I realized that I was being really self-serving and that I wasn't really doing what I thought I was, she said I had to cry for about a week.
Oh, wow.
I had to cry and talk to other people and get out of my way and let go and really dig in and do this work on another level. And I have never heard a white person say that. Yeah. Never. So, as a person who grew up who was born in 1960, who, lived through the assassinations of MLK, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy, on and on and on, the Black Power 70s, just to see all these different aspects of life. And then to be here right now, it's like, it's a beautiful moment. And sometimes I'm real skeptical, because I have been hurt a lot by well-meaning allies. And, and you heal from that and you move on.
Yeah.
Could you tell us also about, we know that the title of the show, Touching Roots, comes from one of your works. Could you tell us about that piece and that title?
It's actually two pieces, two collages that go together. And like I said, my work, this particular collage, Touching Roots, really harkens to indigenous African religions, especially the one that I practice. So you can see imagery, sculptures from Yoruba people. There's an image of a priest dressed in red for one of the deities. You'll see a divination tray there,
yes.
cowrie shells, etc. So when I was putting the piece together, of course, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to be a title of an exhibition. And when I realized that they used, that this was an inspiration for the title, I was really, of course, I was really flattered. We have to stay in touch with our roots. That's basically it. You have to stay in touch with who you are. You have to know who you are. And so this is a calling card for others to view it, to remember that. Remember to stay in touch with who you are. Never forget who you are. Never forget, and never be ashamed of your ancestors. Like, I feel like a lot of, because of the history, is so hard and shameful that folks treated my ancestors in the way that they did. But try not to have shame and to honor your roots and to understand that our history doesn't start with enslavement.
Yeah.
Our history starts on the continent of Africa, of kings, of queens, of communities, of communal living, of the creation of a DNA, math, science, okay? Like, this is where we come from. Astrology, astronomy, the Dogon folks knew about the star Sirius B before Western man created a telescope that found it.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that they knew? They did. Because they're deeply, deeply rooted in culture and spirituality. They are the original technologies, their minds, their hearts. So that's what I'm that's where I'm coming from when I say touching roots, ancestral legacies. You are nothing without your ancestors. Everyone on the planet talks about their ancestors all the time, you know. In 14, so and so, my ancestor did this, and da 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 da. Hey, well, let's talk about. We black folks need to talk about our ancestors and know your ancestry. I think one of the greatest things is like these DNA tests where you can find out exactly where your people came from.
Oh yeah.
So that the more you know, it's better for you.
Yeah.
Because then you can have a solid foundation. And that is one of the things that enslavement did. They didn't want us to have a solid foundation. They didn't want you to know anything about yourself except for what they told you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a total taking back of oneself.
What a beautiful thing. And this has been such an amazing talk. But I just was wondering if, to wrap it up, is there like you've said so much powerful stuff, and like maybe this could retread ground that we've already crossed. But I'm wondering, is there something like, because I feel like this show might be, or will probably bring in people who might not normally go to the MFA. You know, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, where you felt like the work back then just didn't interest you, or you know, and like what do you hope that people take from this, like the new patrons, or maybe people who aren't exactly familiar with looking at art, or I guess what do you hope that people can get out of this?
Get out of this podcast?
No. I'm so sorry. No, the Touching Roots show.
Oh.
No, not our show.
Well, this podcast can reach a lot of people and it's doing dynamic things. One of the things that I love about the changes that have happened in museums, just the fact that they have a celebration for Juneteenth, that brings so many people in. And that they had, there was a show there by the artist Rob Stowe. Okay, he was, let me get this correct. He is I don't want to say comic book artist. He's a graphic artist that creates comics, and he's also a big hip hop artist. Like, his show brought in so many people. Mm-hmm. The thing about the Museum of Fine Arts Boston is that, you know, it's really in Roxbury. Okay, people could say that, you know, they changed the zoning and all that. The museum is basically in Roxbury. Yeah. They're, you know, before they started building up all this new Northeastern stuff, you know, these dorms and stuff, like, it's right on the Orange Line. Yeah. You know, there's housing developments right there next to, what is that architectural school that's right there? Okay, yeah.
Wentworth?
Yes. There are people of color. It's like when you're by Ruggles Station, there's the people of color, and you cross over 2 blocks, and it's a whole other world. Mm. Who makes these dividing lines? What is it that has made people feel like they couldn't come to the museum? Yeah. And I do believe, and I know that the museum has been working on that for a long time, and they're doing a really excellent job by having this particular type of show. And not just this particular type of show, but this show has the majority of the people who are in the show are local Black Boston artists. Yeah. Like, that's kind of unprecedented. Like, we're all here. A lot of us know each other. A lot of us know each other's struggles. A lot of us know that our work is really, really beautiful, and it should be there. And this is one of the things that I love. This because, okay, my work is a part of this show, and people showed up on Juneteenth to hear my artist talk that I haven't seen in like 15 years.
Oh, wow.
20 years. People showing up because they oh my God, Ife's work is going to be at the museum. I want to go see it. I want to go. So I got to see people. And I also met generations of young people that, I would never have met.
Yeah.
And
that sounds so powerful.
The other thing that was really great about this exhibition is that, being a working artist, I don't know what it is about artists being synonymous with working with young people, but, you work in these after school programs, you work in these camps, so there were so many times working in camps that I would take children to the museum and walk through those same halls.
Yeah.
And when I went back there, I was like, wow, I remember being in this cafeteria with these screaming children, trying to get them to do these projects, and here I am full circle. This is quite amazing.
Yeah.
It blew my own mind. And to think that some of those young people that I brought to the museum came to see my exhibition. So, not my exhibition, the exhibition that I'm included in.
Yeah.
So, I just think it's full circle work. I think that the Museum of Fine Arts is doing a really great job under the leadership that they have right now. The curators, I met 3 different young women of color who are curated, 2 who are at the museum, and 1 that was at the ICA. I don't know if she's still there, but so it's just divine to know that people of color who study art history are getting jobs.
Yeah.
They're able to do this, and when you hire a diverse group, it makes your collection diverse because they bring things that you may not have known about or that you didn't understand.
Yeah.
Which broadens your scope, which brings in other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I just see a changing of the tide in all of these museums. It's slow coming because, it's slow to change, and it's happening.
It's long overdue, honestly.
I agree that it's long overdue, and I'm really, really excited to be a part of this great change.
Yes.
Like to be a part of, to be recognized, to be here, and I'm thinking, I've been here. I'm in the same zip code. Like, I'm not even that far. I don't even live that far from the museum. I'm right here. And it's just really beautiful to be recognized. And it's just really humbling. And I'm very happy. Very, very happy and excited for this show that's up for a whole year. And
yeah.
I hope many folks go to see it more than once.
Well, congratulations. That sounds so profound to have that experience and to be part of something like that.
It's amazing.
It's
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I'm very happy, the curator, Martina Tanga, and also they had a cohort of people advising them on what should be in the show.
Yeah, we've talked to a few of them now, and we actually have more interviews scheduled with more people involved with that team. So we're trying to get really in depth with how this came to be. So we're honestly we're honored and just to have like this front row seat to the process that all of you guys have been a part of and put together. So it's an honor for us too to just be a fly on the wall, so to speak.
Well, thank you for, using your platform to elevate the show and, the cohort of artists and collaborators. This is great abolitionist work, and this is how we have to do it. So I'm grateful.
We're grateful to you for coming on here and for doing what you do.
We're honored. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we'll be in touch about when this is all coming out and the production as it goes along. So thank you for being on once again, and we'll be in touch by email about how it all comes together.
Okay. Thank you so much. Peace and love. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
You too. Good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That was incredible.
That went good. That was hard. That went good. It was hard because it was so good. Okay.
Boston Art Podcast is an independent DIY production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. The information contained in this episode represents the views and opinions of the original creators or our guests, and does not represent any institution, organization, or business. Find us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast, and tune in for a new episode every Friday. Thank you for listening.